Hello, and I am live once again. My name is Rob, and I'm from that channel, Performance Check, and I'm here today to explain to each and every one of you why every single element of the hobby is bad for the hobby. I'm, in all seriousness, I absolutely ironically adore the so and so is bad for the hobby thing. Like, I think it's just, it amuses me no end. I'm sure it annoys a lot of people who are actually just like hanging out in the groups or whatever, and they endlessly see this is bad for the hobby. But I guess I'm just a troll at heart. I guess that's what I am. I used to be the troll slayer. Now I've turned into one. My goodness me, I've become the thing that I've always strived to destroy. So that's life, I suppose. So yeah, I'm here to talk about high level play. In particular Dungeons and Dragons, to be honest, in D&D, probably covering a few editions, to be fair, because I have high level play experience more in other editions than 5th edition, but I have had a fair bit of experience in 5th, so I will talk about that. I'm just going to hang out for a little bit while people join, if people join, that is. And yeah, so in the meantime, I'm going to touch on briefly what was being mentioned by Sam earlier. Sam DeMercurio, he was talking about whether or not he was going to jump back on board for 5th edition. And in the end, I think he agreed he did. I think it's an interesting one. I personally really like 5th edition. I know that some people find there to be some failings with 5th, but overall, I think it's just a great simple solution for most people's role-playing game needs. And I'm glad he's given it a go. I think most of us who went and watched Sam's stream, which you should go and watch, by the way, if you haven't already, after this one, go and check it out, because there were some really interesting bits of conversation. But during the conversation, high-level play was mentioned. And I've started noticing quite a lot that people, when talking about, you know, running campaigns and establishing what level they're going to begin at with their sessions or their one-shots or whatever, generally speaking, high-level play is being bandied around. I'm saying bandied around quite a lot lately as well, but bandied around like a dirty word, or dirty words rather, because it's more than one word. Use your brain, Rob. It is 4 minutes past 1 in the morning, but never mind. So yeah, I find this a little bit distressing, because I absolutely love high-level play, and it has been a big part of my my experience of role playing. And today I wanna try and convince some people. Jeff Doty said he, in particular, wanted to be convinced into giving high level play a go. So I suppose that's my mission for this stream, is to see if I can convince the mighty Jeff Doty. We shall see. I see a few people have joined me already. Excellent to see people are here to hang out. So Marquis says, let this hashtag die. Nah, man. No. You see, you did the same thing with Legend Lore, and that didn't stop it. So, what power do you think you have, Heartis? No. Caius has joined. Caius, my faithful friend and brother-in-arms in Against the Shadow. Caius is here. Jeff Doty says, I'm ready to be convinced. I'm hopefully going to be able to convince you. We shall see. If not, it will present some good discussion. To be fair with this as well, I think I'm probably going to be preaching to the converted in a few. I know I'm not alone in thinking that high-level play is a good thing. So I hopefully it will have people back me up, but we'll see. You know, each to their own. Sam DeMacura says that this hashtag will live on forever. It will, Sam, as long as we keep the flame burning. So I'm just going to go ahead and begin. I'm just going to have, like as usual, I'm going to have a puff, going to have a sip of tea, and then we're going to talk about some high-level play. And I'm talking serious high-level play, as opposed to funny high-level play. I suppose that is a thing too. Okay, I'm going to begin with an analogy. And for that analogy, we need to look to DC Comics. That is correct. I'm going to talk to you about the Superman problem. So, Superman, you all know him. Some people love him, some people don't. and I'll tell you the reason why most people don't. The reason is when Superman is written poorly, he can do anything, and generally speaking, Superman can do anything, whether he's being written poorly or well. But regardless, Superman can basically do anything. And Superman is written badly when only his abilities are thrown into question. So when his powers are being tested, which, let's face it, it's not going to go for well for anyone who is testing Superman's powers, because the idea of Superman is that he can achieve anything. He has no limits. And that's why he is presented as sort of like the bastion of our world, So when Superman is written well, Superman is actually forced to think about things. He's forced to make tough choices on behalf of lots and lots of people. This is my philosophy for running high-level adventures. When you are simply just throwing players into the same old combats, into the same old encounters, without forcing them to think about it. By the time we reach high-level play, and by high-level play, I'm talking from basically anywhere up from, I suppose in 5th edition, it'd be anywhere up from level 10. But generally speaking, I'd say 15 to 20 is like proper high level, in my opinion, anyway. So that's my first point about high level play, is that a lot of people fall into the trap of trying to throw the same old at high level players, and they'll be frustrated. DMs get frustrated because they cannot challenge those players. Also, let's not forget that these players, if they've started, like in my opinion they should have, if it's a campaign from relatively low level, they're having to basically, they're basically learning as they're going. You're learning the craft of playing your class and your character as you begin from a low level, and so on. So that's a thing, and that is something that is an advantage. This is something that completely goes against you if you are just doing a one-shot, which is absolutely fine, because on the other hand, it's a one-shot, and if things go to hell, then it's a one-shot, But that is an advantage. And the thing that I'm hearing a lot about high-level play at the moment is that, it really takes ages to run high-level combats. No, it doesn't. It really doesn't. And I can say that with all confidence. In a response to my dear friend Sam, who I was talking about earlier, Sam posted saying, in a baked post, admittedly, but D&D's combat is slow and boring. And I said, well, it's only slow and boring if you make it slow and boring, knowing that he was joking. At least I thought he was joking. But I think the same goes for high-level combat. It's only slow if you make it slow. There are certain steps that you can take to ensure that high-level play is as fast as low-level play. And like I said, that comes from that training, that comes from that spending that amount of time with your character and slowly becoming familiar with more and more abilities as you go, to the point that when you are level 15, level 20, you're going to be able to rattle off exactly what those abilities can do. And you'll be ready when it comes to your turn. And I'm talking about if we have good players, by the way. Like, obviously, this is an assumed thing that players are ready to take their turn when it's their turn. But that goes for any level. That's nothing to do with if they're low level or high level. So I'm gonna see there's a few people chatting, so I'm gonna talk, I'm gonna look at some comments, so, I'm gonna put my glasses on as well, actually, because I can't actually see. Oh god, hang on. Jesus Christ. There we go. Right, so, Jeff Doty says, to be fair, I haven't given high-level play a fair shake for a while, so some of my dislike for it might have stemmed for poorly done games back when I had less experience, so I had some unfair bias to clear up. Dude, and absolutely, and to be fair, that goes for the same for anything, though, and I don't think that's anything to do with your fault. We are all, as human beings, tempered by the experiences of our own lives. That's just a thing. If you experience D&D, just D&D, and you had a bad time every time you play it, you probably wouldn't be playing it now, would you? So it's completely understandable, man. Lloyd Collins joined. Yeah, thanks for the invite to hang, you son of a bitch. I'm sorry, Lloyd, I thought you had been too fatigued from last time. Well, if you want to hang on in a hangout, man, then we can bloody do it, but I thought it would be a little much doing it 2 nights in a row. Phrasing. If you want to hang out, man, we'll do it, and we'll have a discussion about it if you want. Uh, ba, 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 ba. Sam says he was joking. Oh, yeah, about the D&D combat. It's slow and boring. Yeah, but the thing is, it can be. It really can be. Like if you didn't have any idea what you're doing with high level characters, and yeah, it can absolutely be slow and boring. It really can, and I've seen it happen. And I have seen it where people have been ground down by the very abilities that their characters have been like coveting this whole time. Oh my god, finally I'm going to have 3 attacks, blah blah blah. Finally I'm going to be able to cast this spell. And by the time they get to it, you know, they just like the combat has slowed down so much. I am aware that this can happen. I'm just saying that it's in your best interests, and it is in your ability to ensure that that doesn't happen with your games, okay? And it's nothing to do with whether it's high level. It's how you're handling the process of the game at your table. And I'm going to talk a bit more about that later. And it is kind of going to be revisiting some old ground that we have been talking about generally in terms of speeding up combat, whether it be high level or low level. Alan Holloway says, what's all this hipster talk about? I know, man. I think it is kind of hipster saying that. Well, wait, is it hipsters? I think it's more hipster to say that low level characters are better than high level characters. It doesn't matter. We're all hipsters in our way. Jeff Doe says, one question I have for dealing with high level play is balance for classes. Level 18 casters can teleport across the world and through planes and dimensions and dropping meteors, but fighters are just really good fighters. Is that a problem? How do you manage that? Nah, it's not a problem at all. Because if the player wanted, they could also be a spellcaster. You know, I don't put too much stock in balance, to be honest. Sure, spellcasters are, basically the wizard is probably the best and strongest class there is in terms of the damage output and things like that, and their abilities within the in the world. But, we all have the choice at the beginning. We all had the choice at the beginning if you wanted to be a spellcaster, and you chose to be a fighter. You be a fighter. And generally speaking, I think people are okay with that. I think people are okay with having their lot and their role. And let's face it, if it wasn't for that really high-level fighter, then lots of high-level monsters will be getting towards that wizard and killing them. So, why not? I think, I don't know. I don't particularly mind so much because, okay, here's a really good example that I think. I'll go to DC again, okay? So we have the Justice League, okay? And you have Superman, who is basically invincible and can fly and can shoot laser beams out of his eyes. You have Green Lantern that can summon constructs from nothing with pure willpower. You have Wonder Woman, who is basically the perfect warrior, who has fought for thousands of years. You have Martian Manhunter, who is a shape changer and can basically do most of what Superman can do. And then you have Batman. And Batman doesn't have any powers, but he's just badass, okay? And he's just really, really smart, and he can solve any situation. He's the best detective and could take down the Justice League on his own. So, would you say that's balanced? Probably not. Is it cool? Yes, it is. It's all about how you play that character. It's all about what you do with that character, in my opinion. And let's not forget the wizard is also on the side of the fighter. Well, most of the time. We're not going to cover PvP here. But, it's, yeah, it's something to consider. Like, I think that... Okay, here's a D&D example. There was a campaign I was in where I was playing an assassin called Fade. He's one of my favourite characters ever. And I absolutely loved him. And Fade was a very competent, highly trained assassin. And he was in a campaign that my friend was running where it was just two of us playing. And one of our mates was DMing. And Fade and this monk, okay, the other dude was a monk, right? And we came across this, I can't remember what he was like a demigod, or he might have been a demon of some kind in human form, but he basically offered us something. He was like, guys, if you want, I can help you defeat the main big bad of this campaign. He didn't say that, but basically that's what he was saying. I can help you beat the big bad, and I can give you these items, these amazing items that will make your job so much easier, okay? I will give you just these amazing sort of knuckle dusters for your monk, and I will give you these amazing assassin blades for the assassin or whatever. And the player who was the monk immediately, greedily grabbed the magical item, saying, "Hell yeah!" And the dude was like, "Look, but in return, you owe me a favor in the future." And he was like, "Okay." And my character Faye just looked him dead in the eyes and says, "No, I trust in my own abilities. I trust in the fact that I can handle this without taking any help from you. And if I were ever to take help from you in that regard, then it means I don't deserve to win the fight. I need to do it on my own merit." Which is cooler, you know? Obviously, the monk is now more powerful than my assassin character. Is he any better? No, not in my opinion. Also, the assassin character would probably win, but never mind. If we're talking about PvP, but we're not talking about PvP. So, Alan Holloway says, back in my day, high-level play was level 3, and you were lucky to get that far, as DMs are wiping parties. And you as a player took it like a man and rolled a new character at level 1. Dude, I've been there too, you know? I've been there too. And that's why high-level play is a reward. It's a reward as well. It's a reward for progression. I'm getting off topic. We will come back to this, but I completely agree with you that I've been there too, man. I've seen so many of my characters wiped out before they got to level 3, so... Lloyd says, why aren't you more afraid of wizards? Absolutely. Why are you not afraid? There is an elderly man who lives on that mountain right next to your village that if he wanted, he could raise anyone you've ever loved from the dead that will then try and strangle you in your sleep. And then, if that doesn't work, he'll bring a meteor down and smash your village into pieces. Why aren't you more afraid of wizards? I love why aren't you more afraid? We'll do more, Lloyd. Alan Holloway then comments, why aren't you more afraid of the DM? Yeah, well, you should be afraid if the DM is, like, willingly, like, gunning for you, but, yeah. Jeff Doty says, fair enough, I'm not super crazy about balance either, but I was just curious about how you felt about it. Yeah, man, like, and I get there'll be some concerns about, fair play, you know? But the way that I look at it is that role-playing, you know, you're inhabiting another life, you're inhabiting a story, and good stories and real life both aren't fair. You know, and I happen to like being the underdog. I like being the people that can't always cast like the most amazing spells, that have to work harder, because when they do something that's really amazing, it just seems more badass. Like wizards can click their fingers and then something happens, but is that really as cool? I don't know. That's just my philosophy, and I like that there's varying degrees of power between the classes of D&D. Sandy McCary says, back in my day is cracking me up. Alan saying that. Yeah, man. Well, just in my own experience, I've come across a lot of DMs that do what Alan does. Kaya says, your superhero analogy is losing the argument for me. It's not a genre I can buy into. Give me a hero fighting to protect his sister's farm against a foreign army over a superhero fighting to save the universe against demons. There's just more human connection to the first scenario. Well, guys, the reason I brought up superheroes is because Superman and Batman and all that are familiar figures that I can say, well, look, these guys have ridiculous powers against someone that doesn't. It was more of the example rather than the genre. But at that same time, I personally do like it when D&D reaches the level where you are coming up against astral, other dimensional beings and stuff like that. I like it when D&D goes cerebral. I really enjoy it when you get to the point where you are tangling with forces greater than what mankind can understand. Not all the time, but this is the thing. This is what I mean. This is why, like, you have that sort of, that beautiful trajectory where you get your pie and eat it. Sure, you can have those scenarios that you say where you're a hero fighting to protect his sister's farm against a foreign army. And you experience that, and you win the day, and your character grows and becomes better and better and better. Now, I get that in particular settings, like I was chatting to Lloyd yesterday, there was a 2-hour stream that me and Lloyd did over at Jarl DM last night, and Lloyd was explaining to me in a really, really in a really good way why, you know, Iskloft only goes to level 10, and it makes total sense. You know, when you get beyond that point, it isn't realistic, and Iskloft is a grounded, gritty setting, and I completely get that. And for a lot of games, I completely get that you would want to stop at level 10, you know, but I don't think that if you are playing high fantasy or medium fantasy or even low fantasy that's like breaching into high fantasy, which is what I like doing, particularly with the Lore Keepers, it goes from low fantasy and then you start seeing these high fantasy elements bleeding into the mundane. That's what I like about it. And like I was saying, with that, you get your pie and you get you get to eat your cake. Wait, you get to have your cake and eat it. I can't even handle simple phrases right now. But there we go. That's my opinion, guys. Like I know, I totally get like with more grounded things, like you get more human connection and investment. And that's something else that I want to cover in a little bit as well. I have like a list here of things I want to talk about with high level play. Caius then says, isn't high level play just a repeat with bigger numbers? No, not at all, in my opinion. And that actually brings me on to, well, it's something that I did mention before, and I look at high level play as a challenge, Caius. It's like if you were writing a TV show, you are continually having to try and keep your audience engaged. Says me becoming unengaged with what I'm actually talking about. You have to try and keep them engaged. You have to be smart. You have to rise to the challenge. When your high level players can just walk through an encounter, absolutely, that's completely fine. Maybe you don't have to swell the numbers. Maybe you go back, I'm sorry Caius to use the example, but go back to the superhero analogy. If you can't take out the superhero, what do? You go for his friends and you go for his family. You go for the people that can't defend themselves in the way that you can. You put the high-level players in situations where they're forced to make tough decisions on behalf of people. When you're a level 15 character standing in the way of a monster that is about to wipe out civilization, you know, like that, for me personally, like, takes it to another level, like a mythical level. And I like mythical storytelling. And I know it isn't for everyone. Like, I'm not saying this is for everyone at all. I completely get it, if you want to keep it low-level and grounded. I'm just fighting high-level play's corner because I believe it deserves it. Sam DeMarcurio says, all right, Jeff, we need to play high-level D&D, I guess. But this is the thing. That's something else that I need to talk about. Because I just don't want to get off my list, because otherwise I'm going to be bouncing back and forth. But I will address that as well. Jeff Doty is saying, I was just going to say, Sam, I think I need to put my money where my mouth is. I made a video about keep experimenting with different games and styles, time to run a high-level game and see how it feels. And Tyler Hurst just joined. Absolutely, Jeff, but I will want to emphasize something before you go and decide to do that. Absolutely go ahead and run a high-level one-shot or whatever. But let me address something for you later. My next point is that, and this is just a really simple one, with high-level, you finally get to use 100% of the content in the books. I think it's a real shame that some people will go through characters and they will go through story arcs, yet they will have never been able to have cast like high-level spells. They won't have ever had to have access to the rest of the abilities on the progression table. I just think that's a shame, because when you experience different things that characters can do in your game, not only is it making your game more diverse, but it is also giving you ideas for what to use in the next game that you run, you know. Okay, fine, you might not be doing a high-level adventure, but you might be thinking, I want some cool abilities that my villain can do, and my villain needs to be high-level to defend against 4 mid-level players. You know, you are testing things in the field. You are, by not going into high-level, you are not experiencing half of the content in the book. And I think that's a shame. Like I was saying to Caius earlier, the other thing that high-level does, which is also a challenge for DM, and it's also just pretty rad anyway, is that you're expanding the scope of your own world when you're doing homebrew, for instance. So when you reach high level, like I mentioned before, you're dealing with bigger threats. You're dealing with more powerful spells. You're dealing with more powerful people. When I was in 3.5, which is my most high-level experience that I've had, our mainstay heroes were Valdane, the Sorcerer, which I've talked about before, who gets the odd mention in Lawkeepers every now and then now, it seems, Droskor, the Dwarf, and Theodrex, the Ranger. And they all reached very high level. And they weren't the best put together characters. We didn't min-max them in the slightest. They were flawed. They were beautifully rounded characters by the time we were done with them. And Valdane, like I've mentioned on the stream yesterday, went into the 30s in terms of his level. Yet I still wasn't getting bored playing him, and my DM was still able to throw challenges at me that I was embracing and responding well to. And I had a great time doing it. By the end, those heroes had faced Starthief, a man trying to ascend to become a god. They had fought Kaisel, who was a demigod. They'd faced Omnimentals, elementals that form from all 4 different types of elementals into one maelstrom of elementals. They'd faced dragons in Zorfin Tower, the great game. They'd faced demons, they'd faced devils. They had faced Asmodeus himself, okay? Like, if we're talking about, like, mythic legendary storytelling, this thing had it all. And to me, because of the world opening in such a scope, it just allowed all these epic, amazing, saga-esque things to go down in the story, to the point that Valdane got to the point where he founded a guild of heroes because he looked to his players and he said, look, the threats are getting stronger. Every time we beat something back, another thing will return to take its place. We need to be ready, and we need to understand that we're not always going to be here. It was like those kind of discussions that we were having on behalf of hundreds of thousands of people, and it felt great. So that's another thing I want to talk about, the scope of your world opening up, and the possibilities and the challenges of being a DM and having to cope with challenging high-level characters and rewarding them with the story at the same time. Can't beat it. So yeah, that's okay. I've already said the challenge for DM to create better encounters. So, like I was saying before, you've got to be smart. You've got to be savvy. But remember, by this time, as the players have been acclimatizing to their abilities and the more stuff that they get, the higher levels they get, the more you as a DM are getting used to what they can do and finding out how you can challenge them. And I don't just mean mechanically, I mean in terms of their own personalities, in terms of their own personal flaws. When we're talking about high levels, I'm not necessarily saying that the characters are perfect. They aren't perfect people. They make mistakes still. Just because they don't lose fights often doesn't mean that they aren't suffering, you know? I know a lot of people like suffering in this in this community, in the characters in our games, I mean, but that's what great storytelling is, isn't it? It's hitting them with adversity. So again, it's just a great challenge. And when I've just completely lost where I was going with my train of thought, it's because I looked at my tea and I thought I'd really like a sip of tea right now, so you'll forgive me whilst I try and remember. I'm going to have a sip of tea and a puff, and I'll look at some comments and I'll try and remember what I said. So that was Jeff, I read that one. Tyler Hurst. Hey man, how's it going? So Tyler says, I love high-level D&D when it's done right, but when it's done wrong, it's a bunch of extra rules and clutter that needs to be kept track of. Agreed, man. And before you arrived, that's what I basically dealt with at the beginning. I was like, right. And those who have been watching this whole time, I won't repeat it, but basically there are ways that you know, there are ways that low-level play can do exactly the same thing. You know, it's only slow and boring if you make it slow and boring. Tyler Hurst then says, there's a right way and a wrong way to do high-level D&D in my opinion, and it's very distinct and obvious when it's done wrong. I completely agree. And then Tyler Hurst says, Starthief is such a sick villain name. What a blessed individual who made it that name. Hi! Starthief was one of mine. Starthief was wicked. He was one of those, he basically started out as a fairly nice dude. This is the thing. It just shows how devastating that particular campaign went into. I'll tell the story really quickly. I just love war stories in D&D, so I'll tell you it. So the players, which was actually Theodrex, the ranger that I spoke of at this point, and another monk called Sayrak. Again, just 2 people. They were basically helping this dude who went by the name Starthief to go about and basically form this guild and build sort of like connections with other guilds throughout the land and stuff and get recognition, things like that. And now the problem is that they were having to put all this recognition, which is something that I'm dealing with Lawkeepers quite a lot, is the idea of recognition and people, believing, but I was going down the God thing at this point. The more belief a God has, the more powerful they are. And the thing is that this power is being based on the kind of belief and a reaction they were getting from the general public. So anytime they did something good, this dude was gaining in power in good ways. But unfortunately, the players were bickering, they were fighting, they ended up accidentally killing people, they ended up straight up murdering a few people, which was turning this dude, who was supposed to be sort of like this embodiment of good, started going bad. And then suddenly it seemed that one of the heroes of the tales, Starthief, became one of the primary villains. And it ended with a giant city collapsing into the abyss. The whole story I'll tell you another time. That was Starthief. But this is what I mean. Like that, at that point they were pretty high level. They weren't like as high level as some of the others that I mentioned, but they still had to deal with someone who was about to ascend to godhood. So you don't get that every day. Tyler Her says, I like you, Rob. You're a good man. Such a cool villain. Blessings upon you and your dungeon bless mine. Jeff Doty says, oh man, so he was a villain of the party's own making. The best kind of villain. Yeah, absolutely. I basically, because I knew that those two players, they loved each other very much and we're all very close friends, but I know that when you get those two in a session of D&D, they'll bicker in character, but they'll also sort of playfully bicker out of character as well. It's just the kind of people they are. So I decided to use that against them in this particular campaign, and they paid for it. No one made it out of that campaign, put it that way. And Tyler says, yoink on the Starthief concept, reskinning that ish for my home game. Oh, well, dude, I can't stop you. That's all I'll say. I can't stop you. But yeah, I really enjoy Starthief, and he is a character within my canon of my D&D games, and who knows, maybe one day in the future he'll be around again, because what comes around goes around. So anyway, where was I? I got off track talking about Starthief. So, the abilities and progression. Okay, so a lot of people get, and what we were talking about earlier with speeding combat up and stuff, is that abilities and progression slows down the game. But like I was saying before, I see it as a reward. The understanding of your abilities grow as your character begins to understand their abilities, which I think is great. I absolutely love that. Like, I like to think that characters sort of are discovering their abilities as they go. Wizards are discovering, oh, well, if I do this and this, I can cast this spell. And then all of a sudden, ta-da, like, you roleplay it. Like, the worst thing in the world, I think, is when, I say worst thing in the world, there are much worse things in the world than this, but, a not so great thing to do, with D&D is for all of a sudden, a character knows a new spell. Bing! Just like, now I know a new spell, or bing, I have more health, or bing, I feel a bit stronger. There's never like anything to suggest why they've become like a bit better in terms of the story. And I don't mean spending much time on it at all, even if it's just a throwaway line, but I like there to be some kind of explanation why they've got better. But that's what I mean, like, as you as a player are learning to do it, you will make mistakes, your character will make mistakes. When you mechanically make mistakes, it helps the game because your player character is making mistakes, and mistakes make drama, like I say, no one's perfect, not your player characters, doesn't matter how high level they are. So I view the abilities and the very idea of progression as a reward, a storytelling reward, as well as a mechanical one. So that's something else, guys, gotta get it there eventually. Jeff Doe says, just make sure you pay Rob his royalties, or else it'll send his lawyers on you. Nah, man, I'll send Starthief himself, and you won't like that. Jeff Doty says, number of abilities, attacks, spells, etc. is one of the arguments I still can't get behind. I'm with you on that one. If you know the game well, sorry, I lost your comment. If you know the game well, it's not any slower than normal. It's only if you're looking rules up constantly that it gets bad. No, and I'm totally with you, man. And but again, it's the same for any level of play. If you don't know what you're doing, you don't know what you're doing. If you know what you're doing, then you do. Like, it's like, I don't see that as a boundary for me. And I'm not saying I'm perfect either. There have been times where I don't know when things are what I'm doing. Like there have been times in when I'm in the Lord of the Rings game. Most recently, I'll be like, well, how does royalty revealed work? Let me think about this for a second. Let me look it up. But generally speaking, I pour all of my time into making sure that I know what my character can do when it isn't my turn. So when it comes to my turn, generally I'm prepared. And there's hiccups. Sometimes there's hiccups, What's the worst that can happen if there is the odd delay around the table? We're all human beings. Like I say, we all make mistakes. And fine, okay, it slows down the game sometimes. It's not great, but, and I'm very hesitant to say this, but it's a game. Sometimes we need to pause video games so we can go make a drink. The same thing for if we don't know how to make a certain thing work in D&D. We look it up. That's what the book's there for. Or D&D Beyond if you're buying into that daylight robbery. So Tyler Hurst says that idea works particularly well for wizards. I think, but I like to think of leveling for fighters, such as perfecting their skills and growing an understanding of their own potential, almost and honing of the body and the mind. Yeah. Again, to use the Lord of the Rings campaign as an example, my character Faroth, when he was given a new weapon and he was given a new attack, the first thing I did was, well, we're in Mirkwood. I want to seek out one of the best elven drill sergeants or master at arms, and he did that, and he trained with her because he was using a new blade as well. He was getting used to it, getting used to his new ability, and honing his skill. And it's really cool. Some of the best moments in cinema and in TV are just showing people training. What a cool thing to have in your game, to have moments where you're doing the training montage, and not even necessarily doing a montage, spending a session on it maybe, where your character's this is what I need to do this. I can see where I'm going wrong. I can see where my footwork is sloppy. I can see if I step aside in this particular way, I'll be able to make the parry more efficient and my counter that much more deadly. Things like that. I'm not saying spend a session on leveling up every time, but even in old school D&D, people used to do that. The whole going back to the town. You go and do a dungeon, you go back to the town, and that's where your training would happen usually, and where you buy items and stuff, and that goes back to old school D&D. So embrace that as well. Great stuff. I really like that idea. And Tyler Hurst just then says, just use the general term homies when addressing the crowd. Homies. Okay, cool. Matthew Fleury Jr. says, hang on a second, I'm just going to have a sip of tea because my throat's going dry before I read your comment. Dear me. I'm really enjoying this, though. This is good fun. So anyway, Matthew Fleury Jr. says, for D&D, especially 5e, the superhero analogy is totally valid. Think cinematic universe Marvel, and that's totally a high-level party. They're relatable and have human motives, but they're in charge of a lot more, and their actions have way bigger consequences. Exactly, Matthew. And that isn't everyone's jam. Like Kais was saying, I lost him with the superhero analogy, but that was an example I was giving. But yeah, no, it is a really good comparison to make, I think. If you look to the Avengers trying to stop the invasion of the Chitauri in the first Avengers film, that's that's them stepping out into ultra high level territory, isn't it? Where they're having to pull together and they're having to stop an external threat from another world. So yeah, I'm totally with you, man. Jeff Doty says, yeah, that's what I'm saying. System mastery is just important for game flow at any level. System mastery is just harder to come by at high levels. That's not a point against it. No, absolutely. And this is what I'm saying. Like when you are getting used to that progression, that's why I find that high-level one-shots are really tricky. Case in point, I was in a Copper Jackal game last Brigade Con, and I absolutely adored it. But we were level 15, I think we were. I was a level 15 paladin, And on top of all the abilities that a paladin has at level 15, he also had copper jacket abilities as well. And I was looking at my character sheet and I was like, whoa. Like, and I get that. When you jump in at that level, it is much trickier to do. And we came across that lots when I was like playing high level 3.5. Like, if one of our characters died, which I'm afraid to say that monk I was talking about earlier, along with my assassin Fade, that monk had his head pulled off. So my friend made a new character and was allowed to start at level 15. And he he didn't know what he was doing with this level 15 character, understandably, because he hadn't risen to that level like my character had. So he had no understanding of like what was tactically viable, what he could do, like what sort of things he could fall back into. Whereas my dude, because I'd leveled him up from the ground up, he was he was adaptable. Like, he had certain tactics for certain situations. He knew when to strike, he knew when to disappear, he knew when to hold his ground. Man, I miss Fade. I loved Fade so much. You might be hearing more about Fade later on, actually. Fade was one of my favourite characters that I've ever played. Fade and Valdane are probably my two favourites. And Pharoth, I think. I'm starting to fall in love with Pharoth. Let's see. I'm so sorry, I've missed my place. Tyler Hurst says, the worst that can happen is running a 9th level game and having someone make their Warlock character last minute and they've never played it before. That was a Fiesta. Yeah. No, I'm with you there, man. Like, especially for spells as well. Like, because with spells, you have to even more to look up and even more to sort of take care of. And I get that. Warlock's slightly more simple because, you know, you can fall back onto the the Eldritch Blast. The fabled Eldritch Blast. But yeah, for any character, it can be tricky to know what to do when you're just jumping in at high level. And that's why I think high level one-shots are where these problems are coming up the most. Because a lot of people aren't getting to that level through their campaigns. Because let's face it, we all have other stuff to do with our lives. But yeah, starting off a high level is where the problems arise, I think, in the majority of cases anyway. Jeff Doty says, don't even get me started on that one. I sense a sourness around this topic here for you guys. Tyler then says, so here's a question. How do you encourage your players to treat leveling in the way we've been talking? How do you get them to RP the leveling up? Ask them. Okay, Tyler, so you are playing you're playing a cleric. You're playing a cleric of Pelor, okay? We'll keep it simple. And I would like you to ask me what your god says to you at this moment. There is a flash in your dreams at night. You are lying on your back in an open meadow, and you see, bizarrely, beams of sunlight pouring from the darkness of the night, and a voice speaks to you and tells you a secret. How do you react? And you tell them the secret, and that's basically Pelor telling you your new ability, or you can do this, you know. And it doesn't take that long. You then turn around and say, I do this and this and this, and I say this. There you go. You've got a new ability. Well done, Tyler. Your cleric is now better than he was before. And we did a little thing with it, you know. As a DM, it is your job to prompt those kind of things. You know, don't expect your player to come along every time and say when they've leveled up to do it. Like, sometimes say, look, you guys have all leveled up now. You feel a little bit more. You feel more competent. You feel, you know, let's talk about this for a bit. Let's riff it out. It's not necessary all the time, and I get it. We only have a certain amount of hours in the day. But, you know, it's good to do it sometimes. It really is. I don't mean for every level. I think the 3rd level it's really good, because that's when you have your vocations or your specialities or whatever. And vocations, what am I talking about? You know what I mean. When you get to 3rd level, you get your options and you see what you're going to be. Certain things like that. When you get ability mods, maybe, or certain powers or spells. So that's my solution to it, man. I hope that helps. Matthew then says, it's just crazy how scared Wizards is of giving high-level support again. Just because epic play was hot garbage doesn't mean you failed to develop your later levels and core levels. Give us valid threats of parties of 12+. Give us the domain level play back. I want my keep. I'm with you there, man. Like, I'm with you there. And that's the other thing. Like I was saying before, your world is expanding and you're becoming responsible for people. You should have keeps. You should have kingdoms that you are sort of like a patron of, that you protect, you know, and that you're ready to defend in case of another attack, and you've been rewarded for your services. You know, I'm with you there. In terms of the epic play, I think that's where, yeah, Wizards aren't going to support us, but let's face it, Wizards aren't going to support us in a lot of ways. I barely, basically, for Wizards, what Wizards give me are basically the core mechanics and the classes. I think that's the only thing I really use, and obviously the spells and things like that. Like, the gameplay, that's what they give me. In terms of the content, in terms of the monsters, I think to myself, well, I'm on my own, you know, or go to Tome of Beasts, or go to, I don't know, just online resources, or just make your own, you know. I know sometimes, you know, you just want to open a book and there to be like a challenge rating monster that can threaten your high level party. I get that. I totally get that. And again, like I was saying before, you have to rise to the challenge as a DM and a GM and work out smart ways of using them, or making your own, like I say. Jeff Doty says, I'm sorry. Jeff Doty says, Tyler, just ask them, I'd say. Good players don't need much more than that. Yeah, like I was saying, ask them. Jeff then says, unfortunately, that aspect of high level is something I'm unlikely to experience. I only play online, basically, and most campaigns are lucky to last 5 sessions. Much less get to level 15. Well, I think that's the issue then. I think you need to commit. Everyone needs to commit. Like, I've won, like, I think one-shots are fine, but they're nothing in comparison to a campaign, a good campaign. One-shots are nothing in comparison, I'm afraid. And that's my own opinion. I respect one-shots and I like one-shots. I've run one-shots and I've played one-shots, but you don't get the full package, in my opinion. And that's just me. So, Jeff, I recommend you find some people that you like and whip them into shape and say, we're doing a campaign and we're going to stick to our guns and we're going to do this. Tyler Hurst says, I just got shivers from the dulcet voice of Pelor. Well, that should be the case, man. He's a god. I didn't do Pelor very well, but you get my point. You get my point. Like, just a little throwaway thing. What did that take? That took like 2 minutes, you know? Tyler Hurst says, Tome of Beasts is a beautiful resource. Also, a good way to find epic level threats is to research mythology. Completely agreed. Like, and I'm not adverse to throwing epic level threats into low level at the moment. Like, I've done that with Lawkeepers. Like, and I bloody love it. It's good fun. Obviously, they had help. They weren't on their own against an epic threat, but there we go. Matthew says, real talk, Jeff. Need more dedicated groups. It's so sad to watch it drift apart. Lol. Yeah, and I'm not saying like it's on anyone particular or if it's anyone's fault, but like it is a shame. It is a shame when people don't commit to like a full campaign. Yeah, it is tricky. It is tricky. And it's a shame. Tyler then says, Jeff, my boy, you're welcome to join my next long-term campaign when my schedule opens up. That's the thing though, isn't it, Tyler? Schedules. We've all got our busy schedules. Matthew then says, Tome is alright. It suffers from the same issues the standard manual does. I already have to remake plenty of monsters to make up for duds like the 5e Hydra. Dude, like I was so surprised. Lawkeepers Chapter 4, I flung a Hydra at them. They were level 4. The Hydra is challenge level 8, I believe. And while I gave them some hassle with it because I had to like boost it up a little bit. But if you're a smart player, you obviously know not to cut the heads off. You know not to cut the heads off. They're not stupid. And they weren't stupid. They didn't fall for it at all. It's a Hydra. It's like one of the most famous monster abilities in the world. Thank you, Greek mythology. Cheers, guys, back then. So I had to beef it up as well. So I'm totally with you with the Hydra. But there we go. That's part of the game, isn't it? It's like saying this doesn't work. I want it to work like this, and you make it work. And in a way, that's just increasing your own experience, if anything. So there's something to be gained by the ineptitude of others, or doing your own work. Basically, is what I mean. Santa Bakura says, shit, Jeff, let's make a campaign happen. Guys, come on. You know what? I would love to see that. I would love to see you guys jump into a campaign. Hell, if I am planning another campaign as well. So who knows? Who knows? I don't even know who's going to be in the next one. Not Lawkeepers. Lawkeepers is a separate thing. And if there is a second campaign, I don't even know. I know what it might be. I'm not even going to start talking about that though. But what I mean is that I am planning to do another campaign alongside Lawkeepers. So we shall see. We shall see. Matthew says, yes, Rob, nothing tells them you're serious more than a dragon dropping in for the third dragon anti game. Let me read that again. Nothing tells them you're serious more than a dragon dropping in for the 3 dragon anti game. I don't get what you mean, man. I'm sorry. Maybe clarify that for me, because although dropping dragons on people is a fun thing to do, I will admit. Chef Dirty says, let's do it. Ty and or Sam, I'm ready. Guys, do it. I want to see that. I will happily sit and watch that live. I would love to watch that. Jeff, are you going to run it? Is it Jeff that's going to run the game? Is it Sam? Is it Sam trying out 5e finally? Jeff then says, yo, let's talk about that second campaign. Who is going to be in it, and why is it me? So I've been planning on doing a kingdom building campaign for a little while. That is less going out and adventuring and more sort of like sticking to one region and sort of building it up and sort of looking after the people there and empire building, essentially an empire building campaign, basically in the footsteps of La Charme. Because a conversation I was having with Lloyd the other day. Matthew then says, sorry, it's a licensed poker type game Wizards made for D&D. It's great. Oh, cool, man. All right, well, I'll look into that. That's cool. And then Sam Demakiri says, trade-off GMs. Yeah, man. Okay, so I'm just going to make my one final point of high-level play, and then I can ask Jeff if I've convinced him or not. So the main reason why high-level play is because of the role-playing, okay? The role-playing opportunities are amazing. We're going to go back to Valdane, okay? We're going to go back to the legendary sorcerer, the one who has stood against tyrants and kings and omnimentals and dragons and Asmodeus. So Valdane, at level 30 at this point, he was a veteran. He had seen it all, you know? He'd been in relationships with people that he had lost. He had watched some of his friends die. He had killed one of his friends himself. He had defeated a nemesis that had plagued him for years and years and years in probably one of the best combats I've ever been in D&D. A proper wizard's duel. Oh, I'll tell you about that. Why not? But let me make this point first. So he had been to the past, he'd been to the future, he'd been to different dimensions, he'd been to... he'd been all across the setting, you know, the entire setting of Main Realm and over to Verillion and Lockthorn. He'd been all over the world. And by the end of it, he was a different man. But the thing is, because I played him all that time, I remembered every single thing that had happened to him. And I still do. Getting my character to that high level means that the story of Valdane is just a long epic of just one character, and he's one character that I've had high level play with, you know, the dude was just amazing, and every encounter that and every time he was role playing with other people, or interacting with other NPCs, sorry, he's not a real person, but every time he's reacting to NPCs, he would be different than a couple of campaigns ago because he'd experienced other things. You know, before he'd walk in, he'd be, you know, when he was younger, he was brash and arrogant and cocky, and then he'd made mistakes, he'd suffered, he'd lost people, and then he learned to be a bit more careful, and he became more wise, and he used to fight differently. he looked different, you know. There was a time which was one of the most amazing things. Valdane looked and got a vision of the future, and he saw himself on a battlefield of ice in a new coat. He had like basically white all through his hair, because he always had like one streak of white through his fringe, but now it was all here and across here and stuff. Like, he had different equipment, he had like energy blazing in his eyes, and then a good couple of campaigns later, I arrived at that point and I was like, holy Christ. Like, yeah. So all of that to say why high level play is just the best. I'll quickly explain the Wizard Duel. So I do go into this very briefly, actually, in mine and Lloyd's podcast, The Dice Cast. Go and check it out on SoundCloud. We will have it on iTunes soon. We'll have it on iTunes soon. A lot of people have been asking for us to get it on there. And RSS feeds are beyond my abilities, so Lloyd's dealing with it. So the Wizard's Duel, basically, because Valdane had been up against Datsnare, who is his nemesis and a rival sorcerer for years and years and years, they had both become acclimatized to each other's moves and each other's spells. So basically, the way we did it was, we were working out exactly what the other person was going to do before they did it. So the Wizard's Duel happened up here. And then the actual combat took like 5 minutes, if that, because it was just like, he's going to do this, no, he's going to do this, he's going to do this, then I'll counter with this, then I'll do this, then I'll do this, and then bam, 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 and then it was over. Like, and there was just this crazy blast of magical energy where different spells were going off and counters were happening and things like that. And oh man, it was great. Breaking magical items down, blasting people through portals and stuff like that, teleporting. High level play. Amazing. So, Jeff, have I convinced you on high level? Let me know. I'm going to have a puff, sip of tea, and I'm going to go because I've been rambling on. I see Jacob Norman joined as well. Hey man, how's it going? Good to see you, man. It's been a little while. Matthew says, provided I have the freedom to, I'd be down for a rotating GM game. Always good. That's what I did. This is how we got there. Valdane, Droskor, and Theodrex that I mentioned before. Those were us three for ages. We'd had people come and go, but we were the three core people that we would revolve who would DM. So first it was me, then my mate Mike, who played Droskor, took over, then my mate Matt, who played Theodrex, took over, and so on. Like, we just kept revolving it. Like, we'd do like a campaign, we'd stop, we'd have the next person take over, and we'd carry on, you know? Like, and it would happen in a different part of the world, so that then the next DM could make their own part of the world, and just the best way to do it. Best way to do it, in my opinion. Jeff Doty says, damn, that sounds awesome. But tell me, Jeff, have I convinced you? Have I convinced you of the benefits of high-level play? I've been talking for a long time. And it feels like I have too. I'm just going to wait till you say, have I convinced you? I want to know. Jeff Day says, I'm going to give it a go, at least at a one-shot, maybe someday in a campaign. Overall, I give it a mostly convinced but neat experience. No, that's fair. You know, you have to experience it yourself, and I will take that as a win. So there we go, my ramblings on high-level play. Guys, thank you ever so much for hanging out with me. I really enjoyed that. I had a really good time, and it was good for me because I was reminiscing about all the times that I've been in high-level campaigns, and I really enjoyed talking about it, and I enjoyed sharing things with you, like some of Valdane's experiences and Star Thief as well and things like that. So anyway, I'm going to put this on YouTube as ever, so if you've watched this after the fact, then give me a like or a subscribe, or not. We're all friends here, or are we? Thanks for watching, and I hope that all of your performances are up to standard.